welcome back to Studioloo. It's Cindy, and today I'm bringing you just a simple little tutorial to make a journal cover. I think I'm going to make a journal cover series over the next few weeks with a few different journal covers. So this one kind of builds on something that I learned from some other junk journalers, but it was using fabric. Today I'm going to be showing you how to use something that's very familiar to me, which is hand spun art yarns, to make a journal cover. So I've started with just a piece of simple, nice fabric. So this is just like this is a thrift find. It's like a cotton crepe. It's got like an interesting pattern in the background, and then it's got some little fine like drawn kind of flowers, and it's really a cute fabric. So all I'm going to do is just lay it down. It's the size of a journal cover. So where I say we're going to be sort of building off of the technique that I learned with fabric is, again, I'll be using today this embroidery stabilizer to secure the yarn that I'm going to put underneath this. So the yarns that I'm going to be using were all hand spun by me. So there's a variety. There is this very natural Jacob wool brown yarn. It's a thick and thin spun yarn. It's just a single. This is another hand spun yarn. This is also merino wool and cotton, and it's white and green. And then I have this nice sparkly gold Angelina and really soft merino plied yarn. I've got some pink singles. Now in some of my yarns I tend to add, the reason they're art yarns is because I do techniques, or I add things into them. So in this case I added these beautiful crystal beads. So I'm going to find a way to use these a little later. I made one into just a loop, and the other one I left on a piece of yarn because it spun right into the yarn. But for this technique I didn't want to leave them in because I didn't want to risk hitting them with my sewing machine needle when I'm kind of quilting over this. Then the last yarn that I have is these yarns. This is all from the same skein. I just broke it into pieces for the purposes of showing you this. So this is basically a blend of different fibers. It is merino, silk, viscose, sea-cell, and then organza fabric, and it's all been enrobed in like a gold thread. So basically what we're going to do is just take the yarn in strands, and we're going to build across this cover in sort of like stripes. Now with this technique, I think it would be totally acceptable if you wanted to do scrap yarn as well. Like you could literally just throw pieces of yarn on. If you're not familiar with the technique that I used for the other journal that I made, you're essentially, let me grab it actually, hold on. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So this one, so this is the technique that we're building off of. See, that's all been crazy quilted on the back. That's the backing fabric on the inside. And then on top was just all these little tiny bits of fabric. So then the stabilizer went over it. I stitch over the stabilizer, then I wash the stabilizer away. And what you're left with is a cool journal cover. So today we're doing this, but with yarn. So you could use little scraps of yarn. So now I have to decide if I want my stripes to go this way or this way. So I'm thinking I kind of would prefer them to go this way. So I'm just going to basically line up the yarn back and forth, and I'm not going to worry if it's like running off of the edges, because we can go back and trim that. I'm also not going to worry if there's gaps, because I can come back and fill those in, which is actually my intention anyhow, because I want this to be like a really cool, interesting yarn cover. So let's just lay these down, just going back and forth here. And it can be a little fiddly, like that's totally normal. So there we go, we've got a base layer, and then you can just kind of push it over if you want it to be a little bit more solid than what you got. Just sort of push it over and line it up. So then I think I'm going to add a couple strands of this yarn. It just kind of reminds me of like a branch, like a tree branch. And I'm just going to cut this one. Oops. And that's one thing. The yarns will like stick together because, you know, especially if they're wool, the barbs of the yarn, they want to be together. So, and if you live in a high static area, you might want to like try to have maybe a mister bottle of water to just kind of get rid of any static so it doesn't make it really hard for you to work with your yarn. Okay, then I think I'm going to try to add in this bit of organza fabric yarn. And the yarn might not always behave. It may not always want to lay exactly how, you know, you're trying to lie it down. Like the fabric here isn't lying, you know, from end to end like I'd like it to, but that's okay. One thing is if you've had your yarn in a ball for quite some time, you will find that it's a little more twisty, and like this stuff has been just hanging around in my stash for a long time. So being wrinkly like this is to be expected. It doesn't impact you when you're knitting and crocheting, but in this application it will kind of be a pest. So you could actually lay this down and just put it under a tea towel, and you could iron lengths of it if you were looking for really like super straight like pieces. But I'm not. I'm okay. I don't need it to be sort of trained in that way yet. See, you can go back and straighten it out. It's just once you get the ball all unrolled, I think, and you pull your lengths back and forth, and you kind of get the yarn to behave a little more as you go. Okay, so then let's just go back and just, like I said, just kind of neaten it up a little bit and push it over a little bit. And you're going to notice that you're going to have some little holes. Don't worry about that right now. We're going to go back to it. So then I think I'm going to try to just use some of this simple, very simple pink. And another thing that you could do, just to save a little bit of time, is if you just kind of measure your strand to be about the size of your journal, you can literally just pull it like this, get several lengths of it like that, and you could just honestly cut them, and you could lay that down and actually bring the end up so that you get that, you know, that's really an easier way. So I'm just gonna, maybe I'm gonna do that for the rest of this actually. Just a few strands like that. So yeah, that actually is way easier. The things you think of while you're doing this. Okay, there we go. What next? Maybe a little more of this. I'm actually gonna fill in that green. Oops. So one thing you might want to get, let me just see if I have what I do right here. Pardon my reach. I'm just going to grab my bowl here. It's nice to have a bowl handy to throw your yarn into, because then it doesn't roll all over the place if it's balled. I think you would want to have a ball of some kind to do this. You wouldn't want to be dealing with like a skein of yarn. That would probably be extraordinarily frustrating to try to unravel it as you go. So there, I've just got a nice thicker piece of yarn there to just fill that in. Then I'm actually going to keep going with this one to just do the next section in green. Oh, and I forgot to just pick that back up again, lay it down. I forgot to bring my end back up. There we go. And maybe some more of the brown. So I'm just unraveling this a little bit off camera. This one is a little bit harder to work with because I spun it for a felting project to look like a tree branch. So it was kind of purposely a little bit gnarly. So it can be a little harder to work with because it's a more wild yarn. And then we'll use some of this sparkly. Oops, throw it in the box, or the bowl rather. Okay. And just push it over again. Just kind of tamping it down to look at where I need to fill in a bit. I'm going to go in with a little shorter piece. You could also go this direction, so maybe I actually will lay a few of those that way just for interest. And keep in mind, you could also lay other things on top of here, like maybe flat silk flowers or leaves, things like that. I'm going to try to get a little bit of this gold in here. Okay, then I want a little more of this color because I really like this color. Oh, over here, there we go. And you don't have to use a hand spun art yarn. You could use any kind of a hand spun yarn, and you could also use commercial yarns. Just one thing to keep in mind, whatever yarn you use, depending on the thickness. I mean, if you're working with a very thin yarn, just know you're going to need a whole lot of it to do this kind of a look. So a thicker yarn might be a little bit more ideal for this, to just not take up like all of your time. So yeah, just something to consider. Get up there. And if you're looking for yarn like these, I actually, I do sell them in my shop. I have some little packs of shorter lengths of this yarn that often weavers will use, but they would also work very, very well for a project like this. You can look under my hand spun art yarn and you'll see them there. I also have much larger skeins, so if you were looking to, or if you're a knitter and you wanted to, have enough to be able to do this and a project like a hat or something, my my hand spun yarns are very generous yardage, so you could definitely do something like that with them. So I'm just going to kind of readjust how these little stripes were placed and make sure that my edges are covered as well. So what I might do is actually just grab a little more of this green, a bit of a longer length here. I'm just going to lay it across this bottom edge, just sort of like a frame, and then I'm going to bring it up this way. And then I might do the same at the top up here, but with a different yarn. Maybe more of this pink. So we'll just continue the frame from the edge of where I have it up here and bring it down this way. So once your surface looks pretty well covered, you're probably good to stop. I just want to grab a piece of this organza fabric that's part of this yarn. Whoops, and untangle this one from my scissors. That's the thing about yarn, is you're going to definitely tangle yourself up probably. There we go. Let's just put all these guys in here. I'm just going to take a few little pieces of this organza. I'm going to just rip pieces of our silk organza because I like the iridescence of it. And I'm just going to do the same thing here that I did with that branchy looking yarn. Okay, one more, maybe right here. Right there like that. Okay, so I think I'm happy with that, except I want to do one more thing. I'm going to just to add some interest. Like I want to add like a fine line of this dark brown thread, just as like a bit of interest, because I think I really love pink and dark brown, and that's what this is all about. Experimenting, right? So this is the thing, you can do anything you want really with fiber and textiles underneath this embroidery stabilizer, because you know, it's going to hold it all together for you. So I just got to get a little more of this because I want to lay some over on this side. And I think like this can only add to the cool layering stringy effect of this whole thing. I think once we get this put together, people would look at this and be like, what is this journal cover made from? Wow. So yeah. Okay, so there's our extra kind of embellishment. You can just sort of pull that tangled mess around, and yeah, there we go. So it's pretty neat. Now, the next stage is, I just have to see if I can just tug this over just a titch. There we go. Now we have to lay this embroidery stabilizer down on top of this. And hopefully I haven't cut this too short. It fit before. It was actually quite a lot bigger than the fabric. So I think this is just the chunkiness of the yarn here. I don't know if this, hold on. Is this side? Yeah, I think that's the short side. That's my problem. I think I have, yeah, that's the short side. That's why. There we go. Okay. So now we just sort of sandwich it all in. Okay, now I need pins. Let me grab my pins. Okay. So now what you want to do is just go around the edges, pinning this in place. Just make sure you're scooping up that fabric underneath. And I'm just kind of tucking the yarn in as I go along the edge. I can just feel and see where maybe there's a little extra coming out. I think I want to just turn this, do this, this side here. Just make sure you get your pin all the way through to the bottom of your fabric. This could take a little bit of time. So you know what, I'm going to finish going around. So I'm literally going to pin all the way around 4 sides and then throw a few pins in here. So I'm just going to pause while I do that. Okay, so we are all pinned down around the edges. Now, I just realized I don't need to pin it in the center here because unlike those little bits of fabric that I was using on the other piece, this wool isn't going to move. It's going to stay put. It's going to lie down. It's not as big of a piece. The one observation I do have in comparison to the fabric is this is bulkier. It's more bulky, but it's also more sturdy. I can actually turn it over and give it a little pull, a little stretch. I can lay it down and really look at what I'm going to end up with. Now, I think that the decision I'm going to end up making when I finish this is whether I'll want to leave these strands attached or snip them for a neat edge. So I'm going to go ahead and sew this on the sewing machine. I won't keep the camera on for that, but basically at this stage you have a few options. So you could crazy quilt this just like I did with the fabric one, or you could go back and forth and back and forth, almost like a weaving pattern over the strands of yarn, or you could do like you know, a crisscross. So I haven't decided what I want to do yet. I'm just going to kind of wing it and see how it goes. So yeah, I will come back to you once this is sewn down. Okay, so I'm all done sewing. So I have decided I would just kind of stitch back and forth in these like slubby kind of, you know, just, what's the word, like sort of a sidewinder back and forth all the way across. I didn't leave any section too far apart because I wouldn't want the yarn to get all wild, but what I'm imagining is going to happen is you're going to get a lot of softness from the little bits of yarn that can come up. You know, now that I think about it, I might want to actually run this way as well, because some yarns where I pulled the end up, they're going to need to be trapped a little bit more. But before I do that, let me show you the back. How fun is the back? So I just went around, after I sewed the front, I flipped it actually, and I just kind of went around the edge, being careful not to go onto the yarn itself because you don't want to get that wound up in your sewing machine. So yeah, I really like it. It pulled some of the gold threads through to the other side from the yarn itself. So just give me a moment. I'm actually going to do a few lines the other way as well. Okay, so I've now gone the other direction in the same kind of way, fat and skinny kind of swirls. So now the back looks like that. So this will be the inside of the cover, and I really love this. Like, it's hard to tell you how lovely this feels, but it feels really lovely. So now we're at the stage where I need to just go wash this in some hot water and soap. So I'm going to do that off camera, and then I'll come back. I'm not going to trim anything. I'll just show you what it looks like once it is dry. Okay, so we're back, and here it is. It's not dry yet, it's still wet. I just washed it, so it's all wet still. But here we go. This is what it looks like. Isn't that cool? You see how it traps all the yarn. The yarn going this way actually laid down really flatly. And then that gold, and then that cool thread that I threw all over the top. I'm really happy about that. So now I'm gonna wait until this is dry to decide what I want to do with all of these scragglers. So I'll probably come back to you in the morning to kind of capture that and to decide what to do. But I think what I might do is kind of keep a few of the ones that are really well attached, and then maybe snip off some of the ones that aren't. And then the other thing I could do actually is come back. You can lay them back down and you could just stitch over them. Another thing that you could do is if you have fabrics that have cool images on them, like, you know, if you have a fabric with an image of a lady on it, or, you know, a flower, like an applique, you could cut out a fabric and you could applique on this. Also, because we've used wool yarn, if you're a needle felter or even a wet felter, you could do a little needle felting or wet felting on top of this. I think I might try to come back and figure out how to use this bead of yarn and the other one, this beaded yarn on this as well, maybe over here. So I might zigzag stitch across the yarn here, so it would be like a nice opening on the journal front. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about this technique, and I'm excited to come back in the morning and see it all nice and dry. So that's when I will continue this video. So thanks for watching so far, and we'll see you tomorrow. Okay, so it's the next morning. Good morning. And here we have a dry journal cover. So this is the effect that I got. I'll just hold it up so you can just examine it for a minute. You see the all of the yarn is lying down beautifully, and the ones that went across, you can see that they're going across, and some of the sparkle is still there. You can see all that sparkle, and I love how the brown thread, because it's so different how it looks. So what I've decided is I really absolutely love these hanging off here. I mean, it's like a shabby feeling. So what I think I want to do is, just because some of them are like, you know, they could get caught. You can make a decision what you want to do. Do you want to cut them and they can hang? Or do you want to maybe stitch around the edge a little bit and just kind of affix them, either with, you know, hand stitching or yarn or what have you? So what I think I want to do is I want to use more of my hand spun yarn here, and I wanted to figure out how to use this as well as the other little bead that I tied onto this yarn. So I think what I want to do is just get started with like a very large needle. I think I have one in here. That one might be too, oh no, that's okay actually. That's actually fine. But is it sharp enough? Let's see. I've got this one too, if this one doesn't work. I just like a large needle with a sharp point when I'm working with art yarns, because it makes it much easier to thread your needle when you're working with something as bulky as like a bulky yarn. So we got this nice big heavy thing here. So what I'm going to do is just stitch through with this large needle like this and get to the point where I'm at this bead. Now I want the bead on the front, so I'm going to just tie a little knot here just to knot the bead at the front, and I want it closer to the work. There we go. There we go. Then I'm going to actually take and thread with this end first. And what I want to do is just literally go this direction now through the fibers of the yarn, but maybe not through the back of the cloth. I mean, you can embellish this however you want. Truly, this isn't really a part of the tutorial of this method. I'm just showing it to you because I want to work on it and it's fun. So yeah, if you have stuck around to here, you probably, just to learn what I'm doing, you've already figured it out. You know it all. So you don't have to watch this, but I just want to do a little bit just to show people what they could do with this kind of application. So if you're doing this kind of stitching, it probably helps to just have like a hard surface under you so that you can press your needle against it as you're going through the layers here, just because like you don't want to hurt your hands when you're sewing. I think that's a really easy thing to do with these kind of things. Okay, so I'm happy with that, and I'm also just going to leave that there. So that's stitched in. Now on this side where I have a little bit more yarn, And I actually could even tie a knot to make this longer if I wanted. Like if I knew I've got a lot of stitching to go and I really want to make sure I have enough yarn. But you can do that later too. You can tie this at any time. So what I'm doing now is I'm just going to stitch on the edge. I'm going to go right through the fabric. And this can be a little tricky. You know, you got to pull this needle. You might want to, what I sometimes do is I use tweezers like this. This could even use a bigger one. Usually I have a small needle, so I use these little guys, but it just helps you to pull your yarn through. Where the stitches are really small, like where you've sewn around it with your sewing machine, you could have a little trouble getting a heavy needle in there, so you might want to go behind them. Now see how that's just catching the edges of this? And then you can basically just like pull them in however you want, because you're trying to just get rid of anything that could, you know, get caught. If I don't even know if that matters, but I don't know, you could be walking through a wall of, you know, combs and not telling me, I don't know, getting caught on everything. You could be running through the woods with this journal and you don't want it to get caught on a tree. You could have a whole bunch of, you know, porcupines living in your home and you don't want them to catch their needles on it. I don't know. My logic here is just to try to keep this all kind of contained. So I'm happy with this edge now. Still a little, you know, it's got a little bit of bulk, but I'm happy with it. So one thing about knitting and crocheting and most yarn work, there really should be no knots. It's all about weaving in your ends. So that's what I'm doing here by just stitching across in a different direction over here, looping it under the fibers, under the yarns that are stitched to the cloth. I'm just weaving this in to make sure that it's not going to come undone. And then if you're still not comfortable, I'm comfortable because I know how fiber acts. But if you know you haven't worked with fiber before and you think like that's not going to stay, Cindy, you don't want to believe me, that's okay. You can actually go back and stitch right over that if you just really want to secure your seams. Like I said, I'm not going to. I'm literally leaving this like it is. So then I'm going to go all the way around this where these are just really big. So probably here, a little bit here, you know, across this edge. This one's fine. Right here, I'm just going to tack that down a bit, then down here and down here. So the other options that you could, you know, take is you've created, this is a piece of cloth. You don't have to have all this extra at the edges. I just want it there because I love how it looks. So you literally could cut with scissors, or you could go around with a serger and you could, you know, remove this. If you're going to cut with scissors, my recommendation is this. So just cut your yarns off, and then like don't go cutting like down your whole fabric, because you'll hit all these stitches that you don't want to hit. So just cut all your yarns off, and then maybe if you're trying to be super neat, just go again with one more line of stitches all the way on the edge of your fabric, and you'll have a more perfect kind of stitched you know, journal cover. So yeah, this is what we're looking at. So how cute will that be, right? Let me just grab, I actually have, do I have a signature? Well, here we go. I'll take a couple of my birduary drawings, you know, and so you would just, let's say this is a signature, right? You're gonna stitch them in, and it's just gonna be so cute. So you can do these in any size that you like. I chose a relatively small one just because I was doing it for a tutorial, but you could do a large book this way. So yeah, that is my art yarn, what do I want to call this? My art yarn or sewn yarn book cover. And like I said, use hand spun. There's plenty of cool hand spinners out there, art yarn spinners. If you're looking for hand spun art yarn, plenty of sellers on Etsy and other places, and including my shop. So thank you so much for joining me on this little tutorial, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Please subscribe if you enjoy these kind of tutorials. I'm planning to do a whole bunch more, and all of my information, including my shop, can be found down below in the description box. I am Studioloo Studioloo on all social media, Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, Etsy, YouTube, everywhere. I'm Studioloo. So have a wonderful day. Thank you.